More than 300,000 children in England have to share beds with family members because of overcrowding. A study by the National Housing Foundation found that 1 in 6 children are living in cramped conditions because their families cannot afford a suitable home. We're joined by the Director of Policy and Research at the National Housing Federation, Alistair Smyth. Alistair, good to see you this morning. Walk us through the figures, because and this is happening so often these days. This morning, whilst I was going through this story, I was stopped in my tracks. I mean, there is a real significant problem at the moment, isn't there?
Well, yes, that's right. And every child in this country deserves to have access to a good quality and safe home where they have the space to live and to grow. But this research shows that, unfortunately, for too many children, that's just not the case. So 2 million children, that's 1 in 6, as you've said, are living in overcrowded accommodation, and more than 300,000 actually having to share a bed then with another family member. And we're also seeing that around a quarter of adults not being able to actually sleep at night in a bedroom, but instead having to sleep, say, perhaps in the hallway or in the kitchen or even in the bathroom. So really disturbing figures.
I think for some people this will appear to be a stupid question, but just articulate the problems that arise from people living in conditions like this, from having to share beds in this fashion.
Absolutely. So the impact of overcrowding on households is quite profound, and there are a number of them. So the people that took part in this research, they said that their mental and physical health had been negatively affected by this. For children in particular, around half of those living in overcrowded homes said that they felt embarrassed or ashamed even to bring friends back to their house. So that has an impact on their relationships. Also that they didn't have enough space to do their homework, so it affects their educational outcomes. And you can imagine that for a large family without enough space, that pressure of just living in a confined space means worse family dynamics, so simply more arguments or perhaps parents who are unable to get along as well as they might because they don't have the space to do so.
I mean, is this a problem that existed during that COVID period when we were in lockdowns, or is it something that has been exacerbated by that? I'm just wondering about, spending, excuse me, month after month of lockdown in such cramped conditions, having to share beds in that fashion. How bad an issue was it during that period?
I think what we saw during that period in the pandemic is this issue manifesting itself even more because of more people just simply having to spend time in their own homes. But actually, this issue is long-standing, and it's caused by around 4 decades of underinvestment in social housing. The biggest cause of overcrowding in homes is a lack of supply of social homes. So we've seen that by successive governments over 4 decades. And in particular, just over a decade ago, the government made a decision to cut capital funding for new social housing by 63%. And that means that last year, we only built around 6,500 homes for social rent. That's the most affordable tenure, the home that would be most suitable for people in overcrowded homes on lower incomes. And that's a drop of 80%. But research that we co-commissioned at the National Housing Federation a few years ago shows that, in fact, to meet housing need in full, we should be building 90,000 homes for social rent every year for a decade. So we're a huge, huge way away from that.
How easy would it be for the housing industry to scale up the production of new housing, particularly social housing? I mean, I so often see new developments around here in London advertising themselves as having affordable housing contained within. I don't know what their definition of affordable is, but it's certainly nowhere close to mine.
Absolutely. So no one's going to pretend it's a straightforward issue. But that's why we at the National Housing Federation are calling on the government to set out its plans in a long-term plan for how it's going to solve the housing crisis. And we strongly believe that as part of that long-term plan, they need to make a commitment to significantly invest in building new social homes year on year. As I said, at least 90,000 homes for social rent every year for a decade to meet housing need in full. And then only then would we see the issues around overcrowding and other housing-related problems then start to go away.
Just briefly, I mean, is there a role perhaps for housing associations, for the private sector to really go hell for leather in terms of social housing? I mean, is there a market that they could take advantage of?
So for us at the National Housing Federation, we represent housing associations. Our members are already doing as much as they can to help contribute to solving the housing crisis. In fact, building across a range of tenures about 50,000 homes a year. Wow. What we need to do is build more social homes. And we believe that, of course, the private sector has a role to play in that, and we will work in partnership with them on that. But we believe fundamentally housing associations are best placed as not-for-profit landlords who are driven by a social purpose. This is, after all, what we were set up to do, what we exist to do, is to provide housing to those that need it at a price that they can afford. we believe housing associations are the best place to do that.
Alistair, good to talk to you this morning. Thanks for being with us.